Hello again, class. So, you should have submitted your midterm by now. And now we're ready to move on to our next section. So, we're reading some short stories that would be categorized as realism. Now, realism was a trend, a movement in literature during the 19th century, so during the 1800s. We'll be reading a story called Punishment by Rabindranath Tagore, who is from India, and a story called The Cane by Joaquim Machado de Assis from Brazil. Now, realism does not mean necessarily that it's realistic, although our ideas about what makes something realistic is related to the characteristics of realism. Realism refers to a type of fiction and drama with the following characteristics. We have objective representation. In fiction, we see lots of visual description of surroundings. We also have an omniscient narrator. That means the narrator sees everything. The word omniscient literally means all-seeing. The narrator reports on everything that's going on in that fictional world, including the character's emotions. We have characters from different social classes. We see poor people, we see slaves, we see wealthy people, middle class people, and we see how these different social classes interact with each other. And then also there is moral ambiguity. And what I mean by that is, in a realist story, the writer isn't telling us what's right. The writer is showing us something that happens in the world, something that he describes objectively, and then it's up to the reader to decide what's the right thing to do in that situation. And then remember, in realism, there's lots of details from everyday life. For instance, in The Cane, we see details about Señorita's setting for tea. Or in Punishment, we hear about what the household is like in the Rui family. That the sisters are or the wives are fighting all the time. So, both of the stories, Punishment and The Cane, contain the qualities that I just listed: objective representation, an omniscient narrator, characters from different social classes, moral ambiguity or a moral question, and details from everyday life. First, we have Punishment by Rabindranath Tagore. Now, to go into a little more detail there, in Punishment, we see a poor family of laborers in which there's a murder. We sympathize with the Rui brothers because we see how, their economic situation makes their lives difficult. There's literally not any food to eat for dinner. They're very poor. And we see how they try to cope with this event, with the murder of Radha. And Chidam lays all of the blame on his wife, Chandra. But she did not kill her sister-in-law. She is told by her husband, Chidam, that she must take the blame for it. And so this story leaves us with a moral question, or maybe several moral questions. Why does Chandra do it? Why does she admit to killing someone that she didn't kill? And we also see different social classes here. We see the poor Rui family. We see their landlord, who would be more like a middle-class person, Mr. Chakravarti. And we see the details of their everyday lives. We see the fighting between the brothers' wives, and then we see, the leisurely life of Mr. Chakravarti. Next, we have our story from Brazil by Machado de Assis called The Cane. Now, this story is set when the slave trade, was still active in Brazil. And we meet Señorita, a woman who owns slaves. Now, the moral dilemma here is this: should Damião speak up and try to protect the slave Lucretia from being beaten by Señorita? Or should he just pass her the cane that she asks for and be done with it? The story builds up to this climactic decision at the end, right, where he's asked to pass the cane. And we learn, for instance, why Damiao needs to be in Senorita's favor. He wants her to help get him out of seminary school. Seminary school is a school where young men go to become priests, and he doesn't want to be a priest. In addition to needing her help, Damiao is also torn because he feels bad for Lucretia, the slave. She is a very sickly girl, and she's distracted by him from her work, which leads her to fall behind and get in trouble. So, this story is definitely a realist story. It contains moral ambiguity. We see characters from different social classes. We see lots of detail from everyday life of a slave owner in Brazil. So, in the end, do you think you understand why Damiao chooses to pass the cane to Senorita? And what do you think you would do if you were in his situation? So, in this section, we have discussion board questions for each story and a voice thread assignment. So, in the voice thread assignment, the question is, what realist qualities do you see in these stories? Remember, you only have to speak for 1 minute, and you should prepare some notes and just speak naturally. Don't read from a prepared text. And feel free to share candidly about your experience reading these stories. What I love about these realist stories is that they make you think about ethical questions. I look forward to hearing your thoughts.